Death does not arrive gently. It explodes into your existence and rips the illusion of control out of your hands in a single unstoppable moment. 1 second, you are breathing, planning, worrying about things that suddenly mean nothing, and the next second, a door opens that no wealth, power, or apology can ever close again. Islam teaches that this moment is not peaceful for most souls. It is shocking, overwhelming, and terrifyingly clear. The truth hits all at once, the truth that life was a test, distractions were traps, and time was far shorter than it ever felt. This is the instant where excuses die before the body does, where the soul realizes it was warned again and again, yet still delayed what mattered most. Before we go any further, write in the comments where you're watching this from right now, whether it's your bedroom, your phone at night, or somewhere you shouldn't be watching at all. And if you're searching for content that wakes the soul instead of numbing it, subscribe to this channel, because what comes next is not talked about enough. The moment the soul is pulled from the body, everything changes faster than the blink of an eye. In Islamic teaching, this separation is not symbolic. It is violent for some and gentle for others, depending on how the soul lived and what it clung to. The righteous soul is drawn out like water flowing from a vessel, while another is torn out like thorns dragged through wet wool. And this is not poetry. This is how the Prophet described it. Angels appear not as comforting figures from imagination, but as beings whose presence alone collapses denial instantly. At this point, the soul understands something terrifyingly simple. There is no return, no negotiation, and no delay left. As soon as death occurs, the soul does not float aimlessly or fall asleep. Islam teaches that consciousness continues immediately, sharper than before, stripped of distraction and ego. The soul sees its body being washed, shrouded, prayed over, and carried, and realizes for the first time how powerless it truly is. The world it obsessed over moves on without it. Conversations continue, phones buzz, food is eaten, laughter returns, while it is pulled toward a reality that was always promised but rarely prepared for. This is where Barzakh begins, the hidden realm between this life and the day of judgment, a place not bound by earthly time, but by truth. Barzakh is not a waiting room. It is the first destination of the afterlife. It is where the soul begins to taste consequences before the final judgment even arrives. Comfort or fear, expansion or suffocation, light or darkness, all of it begins here. The grave is not just a hole in the ground. It is an environment created around the soul based on belief, sincerity, and action. This is why the Prophet said the grave is either a garden from paradise or a pit from hell, because the afterlife does not wait for the trumpet to be blown to begin. Then comes the moment that shakes even those who claimed certainty in life. After burial, when the footsteps of family fade and silence takes over, 2 angels appear with a presence that freezes fear into the soul. Munkar and Nakir do not ask complex questions. They ask the simplest ones imaginable. Who is your Lord? What is your religion? Who is your prophet? Yet these questions are not answered from memory, education, or culture. They are answered from what the heart lived and obeyed. This is where many souls collapse internally. A person may have known the answers their entire life, repeated them thousands of times, but now the tongue feels heavy, the mind panics, and certainty evaporates, because belief that never reached the heart becomes useless here. The soul realizes that praying mechanically, following Islam culturally, or delaying repentance has consequences deeper than imagined. There is no cheating, no guessing, no second attempt. For the believer who lived with sincerity, something incredible happens. The grave expands as far as the eye can see. Light enters and peace descends like a long-awaited relief. The soul answers effortlessly, not because it memorized, but because it lived those answers daily. Angels bring reassurance, saying, "Sleep like a bride on her wedding night until the day of judgment." The soul is shown its place in paradise, and anticipation replaces fear. But for the one who delayed, ignored, or lived divided between truth and desire, the experience is crushing. The grave tightens until ribs feel as though they overlap. Darkness surrounds the soul, and regret becomes immediate and relentless. The questions feel like accusations rather than inquiries, because the soul already knows it chose comfort over obedience. This is when the soul realizes that warnings were mercy, not pressure, and reminders were gifts, not annoyances. In this state, the soul understands something it never fully grasped in life. Death did not change reality, it revealed it. What comes next is not random, it is earned. And the journey after death does not begin 40 days later. It begins the second the soul leaves the body. The rest of the story only unfolds from there. Many people whisper about the soul staying near the body for 40 days, watching loved ones, drifting between worlds. But Islamic teachings describe something far more precise and far more serious. The soul is not left to wander or observe casually. It is placed immediately into a state that matches how it lived. From the moment questioning in the grave ends, the soul begins a routine of exposure to its future destination. For some, a window is opened toward paradise, bringing fragrance, light, and peace, while for others, a door is opened toward hell, bringing heat, fear, and a crushing sense of regret. This exposure is not symbolic, it is experiential, creating anticipation or dread that repeats again and again, making the unseen feel closer than ever before. Islam teaches that the soul now understands what was once invisible. Truths heard in sermons, but ignored now feel painfully obvious. The soul realizes that sins once justified as small were never small, and good deeds once postponed were far more valuable than imagined. Time in Barzakh does not move like time on earth. Days do not pass by sunrise and sunset, but by emotional weight and awareness. A moment of fear can feel endless, while a moment of peace can feel like rest after a lifetime of exhaustion. This is why the Prophet emphasized seeking protection from the punishment of the grave in daily prayers. He did not speak of Barzakh as a neutral waiting room, but as a place where consequences begin unfolding immediately. The soul is shown scenes, not to torture or comfort randomly, but to prepare it for what is coming next. For the righteous, seeing paradise increases gratitude and patience, while for others, seeing hell intensifies regret and longing for a return that will never come. At this stage, the soul begins replaying life with brutal clarity. Moments of arrogance, missed prayers, delayed repentance, and ignored reminders resurface vividly, not as memories softened by emotion, but as facts stripped of excuses. The soul understands that Allah was always watching, always offering chances, always opening doors, while it kept choosing comfort, distraction, or pride. This awareness alone becomes a form of suffering for some, heavier than any physical pain. As Barzakh continues, something else begins to happen that the living rarely think about. Deeds from the world of the living still reach the dead. When someone gives charity on behalf of the deceased, makes sincere dua, or fulfills an obligation they left behind, the soul feels relief like a burden being lifted. These acts appear as light, space, or ease, reminding the soul that mercy has not vanished entirely. This is why Islam encourages praying for the dead, because those prayers arrive in ways the soul can feel. But not all arrivals bring relief. Unpaid debts, unresolved injustice, broken trusts, and harm done to others return as weight and darkness. The soul is confronted with consequences that can no longer be hidden behind excuses or silence. Every right taken unjustly now demands justice, and every apology delayed now echoes painfully. The soul realizes that fixing these things in life would have been easier than facing them now. This is the phase where regret reaches its peak. The soul does not ask to return to enjoy life again. It asks to return to pray properly, to give sincerely, to apologize honestly, and to obey without delay. Allah tells us in the Quran that such a request will never be granted, not because He is unjust, but because the test has ended. Faith was meant to be proven without seeing, and now sight has replaced belief. The opportunity that once felt long and flexible now feels shockingly short. Barzakh continues like this: awareness without control, clarity without action, understanding without the ability to change outcomes. The soul learns that the real tragedy was never death itself. The tragedy was knowing the truth, having time, and still choosing delay. What comes next only deepens this realization, as the soul waits for the trumpet that will end Barzakh and begins something far greater and far more final. As days pass in the world of the living, something strange happens that Islam quietly corrects, but culture often misunderstands. Families begin counting time after death. Gatherings are held, emotions peak, and then slowly soften, and many believe that something significant changes for the soul around a certain number of days. But Islamic teaching is firm and unsettling here. Nothing magically resets, nothing completes, and nothing ends at a specific day after death. The soul's condition was determined the moment it entered Barzakh, and what follows is continuity, not transformation. What changes after weeks pass is not the soul's reality, but the attention of the living. From the soul's perspective, time does not bring relief simply because days are passing on earth. Barzakh is not measured by calendars or ceremonies. It is measured by awareness and consequence. Whether the living remember intensely or move on slowly, the soul remains fully conscious of its state. Comfort remains comfort, and distress remains distress, unaffected by how often the grave is visited or how many people still speak its name. This is why Islam places emphasis on preparation before death, not rituals after it. The belief that the 40th day marks a turning point distracts from a more frightening truth. The soul does not wait for milestones. It lives continuously with what it earned. If there is peace, it continues and deepens, and if there is suffering, it does not fade with time. The grave does not forget, and Barzakh does not soften simply because the world above grows quieter. This realization alone crushes the illusion that there is still time once death arrives. As this awareness settles, another layer of experience begins for the soul, regret that is sharp, intelligent, and constant. Unlike regret in the dunya, which can be numbed by distraction or justified by excuses, regret in Barzakh has nowhere to hide. Every missed prayer reappears clearly, every delayed repentance feels deliberate, and every moment of arrogance stands exposed. The soul now understands verses it once heard casually, warnings it once scrolled past, and advice it once postponed. Knowledge that did not lead to action becomes a source of pain rather than comfort. The The soul begins connecting dots it never bothered to connect in life. It sees how small sins piled up, how intentions weakened through delay, and how sincerity was traded for appearance. The moments once considered insignificant now feel heavy, while sacrifices once feared now seem easy in hindsight. The soul realizes that Allah never demanded perfection, only honesty and effort, yet even that was delayed again and again. This clarity hurts more than ignorance ever did. For some souls, regret is mixed with a painful longing, not a longing for pleasure or status, but a longing for one more sincere sujood, one prayer without distraction, one act of charity done purely for Allah. The soul understands that even a small deed done with sincerity could have changed everything. But now, the door of action is closed and only awareness remains. This is the punishment of knowledge arriving too late. Others experience regret layered with fear. Fear of what has already been shown, fear of what is still coming, fear rooted not in imagination but in certainty. The soul knows now that Allah was just, that warnings were clear, and that guidance was accessible. This makes the regret heavier, because blame has nowhere to land except on the self. The soul finally admits what pride once rejected. Yet even within regret, Islam reminds us of balance. Not every soul in Barzakh is drowning in despair. For the believer who struggled sincerely, who fell but kept returning, regret exists without destruction. It becomes reflection rather than torture, and hope rather than panic. The soul understands mistakes, but also recognizes mercy, and this balance becomes a source of calm instead of collapse. What becomes painfully clear at this stage is that death did not expose hidden injustice from Allah. It exposed hidden priorities within the soul. What mattered most in life now defines everything. And as Barzakh continues, the soul lives with one unchanging truth. The test was easier than it felt, and the consequences are more real than ever imagined. Despite everything described so far, Islam is not a religion that leaves the soul suspended in despair. Within Barzakh, there exists a reality rarely emphasized enough, a reality of mercy, rest, and quiet reassurance for those who lived with sincere faith, even if imperfect. For these souls, the grave does not feel like isolation, but like release. The weight of dunya obligations falls away, temptations disappear, and the constant inner struggle finally ends. What replaces it is a calm anticipation, a feeling of having reached safety after a long and exhausting journey. Angels visit these souls not with fear, but with comfort. They bring glad tidings, reassurance, and reminders that what lies ahead is far greater than what was left behind. The soul is shown its place in paradise repeatedly, not to torture with longing, but to strengthen hope and patience. Every time this vision appears, it feels closer, more real, more deserved through Allah's mercy. This is why some souls in Barzakh are described as sleeping peacefully, awaiting the day of judgment like someone resting before a promised reunion. For these souls, Barzakh becomes a space of healing. Regrets exist, but they no longer crush. Mistakes are understood, forgiven, and placed into perspective. The soul recognizes that Allah accepted its struggle, its repentance, and its return, even if it stumbled often. This realization transforms fear into gratitude and waiting into hope. This is why the Prophet taught believers to ask Allah for a good ending more than anything else, because how life ends defines how Barzakh begins. A heart that died while turning back to Allah is not treated the same as a heart that died running from Him. In Barzakh, intention finally shows its true weight. Sincerity, even with weakness, shines brighter than perfection without humility. As Barzakh continues, the soul begins to understand a truth the living often overlook. The afterlife is not sudden or disconnected. It is a continuation of direction. Whoever was walking toward Allah finds that path continuing with ease, and whoever was walking away finds that distance painfully preserved. Death does not change direction, it locks it in. This leads to the most uncomfortable realization of all. The story of 40 days after death was never about those 40 days. It was always about the days before death. Islam does not emphasize timelines after burial because the real deadline existed long before it. Every prayer delayed, every sin normalized, every reminder ignored quietly shaped Barzakh before it ever arrived. The soul now sees life as it truly was, not too hard, not too confusing, not unfair. It sees how guidance appeared repeatedly through people, moments, discomfort, and warnings. It sees how often Allah gave space to return, soften, and change. And it sees how easily those chances were postponed for later. This understanding is what turns Barzakh into a mirror for the living, because the soul is no longer asking what happens after death. It already knows. The real question now belongs to those still breathing. What is being built right now that will answer in the grave? Islam does not reveal these truths to terrify for entertainment. It reveals them to wake hearts before it is too late. Barzakh is not meant to be obsessed over. It is meant to be prepared for. Every sincere repentance, every hidden good deed, every prayer done with presence quietly reshapes what waits beyond death. In the end, the soul learns something undeniable. Allah was never unfair, never unclear, and never distant. What felt hidden in life becomes obvious after death. The grave does not invent outcomes, it reveals what was already growing. And the 40 days people talk about pass without meaning, while the life that came before echoes forever.